Hey everyone. In today's video, I wanted to give you all kind of a little bit of a behind the scenes peek into my software engineering process. One of the questions that comes up fairly frequently uh, is, okay, so we're ready to use Cortex, but what happens if we find bugs or if there are other features that we want to see, um, that sort of thing. So I want to give you a behind the scenes look at how I manage my process, um, and also talk a little bit about release planning. Um, but before we get into that, I do want to remind you all that every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, I host what I call the Cortex Users Group. And that's basically an opportunity for all of you. It doesn't matter if you're using Cortex, thinking about using Cortex, just interested in learning more about Cortex, um, to come ask me questions, learn more about what I'm doing on Cortex. I typically share, some of the things that I'm actively working on that week, um, or you can ask other people about their experiences with Cortex and kind of learn from others. Um, it's really modeled after the whole community uh, oriented Sharewell users group, from many, many years ago. Um, it's intended to be a forum for all of you and for all of you to make it what it needs to be. Um, I'm just the host. I just provide the venue. It's a Zoom call. You can find a link to request an invite down in the description below. Um, Along with, there's a bunch of other links down there to the site that I typically demo from in these videos, which actually I'll mention there are some new upcoming beta experimental features turned on there. I'm going to start doing a little more of that. They will be clearly marked as experimental or beta. So when you download Cortex, you're not going to see them unless you specifically turn them on. And they are intentionally undocumented. Um, so there's not going to be documentation on how to turn on the experimental features. But if it's something that you want to try out, talk to me, schedule some time on my calendar, or send me an email. Again, information down below, and we'll talk about getting those turned on your system so you can play around with them and give me feedback. Um, and that's really the perfect segue into what this video is going to be all about. Is the roadmap for Cortex is 100% customer driven. Um, okay, maybe not technically 100% customer driven, maybe 90%, but that's because the other 10% is bugs that I find as I'm working on other things. So uh, the vast majority of the work that I do on Cortex is driven by you all, the community, um, customers, partners, um, you know, even people who aren't using Cortex right now, but have databases and have specific questions about certain aspects of their configuration. I've had people send me structure only zars, structure lookup zars, um, just to try it out, and they have been fantastic. That's the way I'm going to solve a lot of these issues. I do log a lot in Cortex, and we can bump up the logging. That is documented. You can find that in the documentation, which is also linked down below. How to find the logs, how to bump up logging to diagnose some issues if you run into any issues. Um, I can fix a lot of things based just on the logs that I get from Cortex. But if I can't, sometimes I need a structure and lookup zar. It's the nature of Sharewell. It's also the nature of Cortex. But with those, I can usually pinpoint the issue that's going on. In a few cases, I have to set up my Sharewell instance to kind of create the environment to mimic what you're looking at, so that I can actually get the source of data in the right places, so that I can set up a situation. But that's the extreme minority. Maybe 2% of the issues that I've had to deal with um, have come about that way. Everything else, it's logging and a structure only, or structure and lookups are. Um, those are immensely helpful. Um, yeah. So let's talk about what the release planning. At least let's talk about the rest of 2024 for a second. So right now, it is basically mid-August. It's August 19th when I'm recording this. By the time it goes live, it'll probably be August 20th. But it's effectively mid-August. My plan, and everything is looking good for this, is that Cortex 1.5 will go out by the end of August. That's what I've been promising people, and it looks like it'll absolutely happen in one form or another. There are a couple features that might not be, perfect, but they'll be in there in Cortex 1.5. And those are being able to see all the details of one steps. At the very least, you'll be able to see the details of most of the commonly used one step, sub-step, stub actions, whatever. Some of the most commonly used details of one steps. And the second one is external business objects. For 1.5, external business objects simply won't break the system. I'm not going to be running queries against external data connections, external business objects. That'll probably be one of the main tent poles of 1.6, which, as it would happen, segues into the next topic of conversation, which is that 1.6 will come out in October. So the idea is that every 2 months there will be a new release. So 1.5 is coming out in August, and then September, October. 1.6 will come out in October, and then November, December. 1.7 will come out by the end of the year. That's the plan. I don't know what'll be in 1.7, but again, it'll be mostly community driven. Same with 1.6. I know one of the tentpole features for 1.6, obviously, but everything else is going to be community driven. So if you have a specific need that you want me to build into Cortex, let me know. If you have a specific bug you're seeing in Cortex, hopefully you're not seeing any bugs, but it's software, there are going to be bugs. Certainly let me know, and we'll get it in for the next release. So those are kind of and technically those are minor releases, but those are the major releases conceptually, right? 1.5, 1.6, 1.7. In between, I'll do patch releases. And what patch releases will amount to is basically if there is a bug in something, let's say 1.5, you try to use it, and for whatever reason, you can't see any change records. Every time you browse to a change record, you get the yellow banner across the bottom that says you need to reload the page in order to see anything. An unexpected error occurred. Okay, we'll work together to get the details. I'll figure out what's going on. That'll be a 1.5.1 or a 1.5.2 if it needs to be. My goal would be not to have more than 2 or 3 of those, and certainly no more frequently than weekly. So I think 1.4, there was a 1.4.1, a 1.4.2. I know with 1.3, there was a 1.3.2. Just because we found issues, we found situations that were breaking people's content, or they weren't able to see their content. So that's why we have patch releases. Yeah. So I promised. Well, maybe I didn't promise, but I do promise to show a bit of my screen. So I'm actually going to show a little bit of behind the scenes. So I use Linear. I think it's linear.app is the website for my project management. And what I'm showing here is everything that's going into 1.5. Actually, this one right here, external business objects not handled, that'll probably get pushed to 1.6. Certainly the bulk of it will. And probably this one, seeing how one steps were built. Again, there's enough in 1.5 to actually be able to check that box, and that's one of the experimental features. You'll see it on the demo site. It says actions, and then in parentheses it says experimental, because it's not quite done yet. But if you do want to turn it on, you can turn it on. It won't break. It's just it doesn't show everything that you might want to see. But everything else, and I would say, I think actually literally everything in this list was reported by a customer or a partner, or I came across it as I was fixing something else. Um, and you can see, let's see, we've got 21 issues down here, 22, I guess technically, and then five that haven't been done yet. So we're getting really close the to the end of what's going to go into 1.5. Um, and again, this one will probably get deferred. So really only four issues still to be sorted out. And you can see they're all planned for this week. So this number over here Linear has a concept of cycle. It's not. It's more or less a sprint, but they don't call it a sprint or an iteration because they, don't want to be too tied to any particular uh, process. So it's just a cycle. So um, it looks like I started some of this stuff in cycle 33. So 1, 2, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 6 cycles. So that's about a month and a half. And that's the cadence that I'm looking for a release. Um, so roughly six weeks. Did I say 6 months? I didn't mean to say 6 months. 6 weeks for a release, and then a couple weeks of testing. So basically, what'll happen is uh, once I get those 4 issues knocked out, which should be this week, I'll cut a release candidate. Release candidates will go to the release site just like the stable releases, just like the beta releases have gone out. I've released a few betas that are, certainly not done. They're not they're not expected to be done, but they kind of showcase some of the bug fixes and interim features that I've released. In some cases, to test them on customer data, because sure, I can test on a structure. Onlys are a structure and lookups are, but there's no substitute for actually testing on the real thing. So I release those betas, and customers and partners run them on the actual databases because they obviously have access to the actual databases, whereas I do not. So that's kind of how that works for the betas. And then at the end of this week, once I have these 4 issues knocked out, I'll create a release candidate that'll be available for anyone to pull down and test. And if you find an issue, report it. If it's something that blocks the release, that prevents people from actually using the product, then there'll be another release candidate and another release candidate until all of those issues are resolved, in which case 1.5 will actually ship. And there'll be just v1.5.0 in the releases on the releases site. That's not tagged as a release candidate, not tagged as a beta. Um, and if it's not that big a deal, if it is a bug but not preventing Cortex from being used, and especially like let's say there's a bug in one of the experimental features, that's obviously not going to block the release. That'll go into the backlog for 1.6 or potentially 1.7, but likely 1.6. So that's kind of the overview of how those releases are going to go. Basically, it's we introduce specific features, we fix specific bugs, we want to support the customer databases that we know about, and that determines the upcoming release. Anything after that goes into the next release. So bugs, report them directly to me. You can send me email. Again, details in the description box below. Features, you can send them to me too, but we also have a link down in the description below to a service called Canny, which provides like feature requests. That's what it is. It's an idea management platform. You can request features. There are some there you can see that we've done and have gone into. I think some actually went into 1.5, but certainly previous previous releases, and some just haven't been accepted for an upcoming release yet, because we're trying to prioritize the things that will make the biggest difference for the most amount of people and actually enable people to be able to use Cortex on their databases. And there are some things in there you'll see for quality of life enhancements, nice to haves. Can we change the color of this screen? And some of them are, yes, they wouldn't take us very long to do, but at the same time, we really want to prioritize getting this out to you all, so you're not tied to Cherwell anymore. So you can actually move off of Cherwell onto your new platform. You can, if you're cutting ties with Avanti, you can actually have that conversation with them. If you're switching over to Neurons, you can do that completely and not have the old Cherwell environment hanging around anymore. And you can kind of make that clean switch and not perpetuate the situation any longer than it needs to be. I think I've talked for long enough. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. If you want to schedule time with me, links in the description. If you want to learn more about Cortex, of course, links in the description. Subscribe to the channel, click the like button, all that good stuff, since it is a YouTube video. And yeah, let's talk in the comments, and hopefully I'll see you in next week's video, when I'll probably actually do a full demo of Cortex 1.5, of what Cortex is now, because the video I've been using for the demo is still of Cortex 1.2 or 1.3. And a lot has happened since then. So stay tuned for that. We'll do a full demo of everything there is to know about Cortex in next week's video. Thanks for watching. See you next week.